Remember when action figures had like 4 points of articulation, and the nap crunch was an actual exercise that you did and not something that you talked about when holding action figures? And there was no such thing as posing. You literally just stood a figure upright on a table, and that was basically posing. And here we are now talking about toe articulation and even finger articulation. The hobby has definitely come a very long way since those days. And you guessed it, yes, we are here yet again to talk about the giant Man HasLab project, which at the moment of me recording this is just about 5 days from either being fully funded or being canceled or shut down. And at the moment, as you guys can see, the number sits just a little over 6,200. And I know most of you guys are going to take this as a joke, but I'm being dead serious. I was literally scrolling through a Facebook group yesterday that was about this particular topic, and I remember reading some comments or some postings of people getting really desperate and actually going to the community and asking them to buy multiples just so this could get funded. So the heat is turning up and people are really starting to get into desperate mode. And if you guys have watched any of my previous videos where I talked about Giant Man, I was brutally honest about it, and I said that it was a pretty good investment if you were a huge Marvel fan, or if you were a huge fan of the Avengers and you already had multiple Ant-Mans that you could display next to him, or if you already had a pretty good supporting cast of Avengers that you could display with him. But if you're not a huge fan of the comic book style offerings from Hasbro, you were probably going to pass on this. But I genuinely thought that it was, a good pickup, a good purchase. I know the $200 price point is a little bit high and you may be slightly overpaying for it. But as I mentioned in some of the previous videos, and the point that I was really trying to drive home, you're already slightly overpaying for most Marvel Legends, in my personal opinion. For you to pay a little bit extra for this Giant Man, I don't think was really that outlandish, and I do feel like the face plates are completely unnecessary. I completely agree with you guys, but as I said, I think most of the purchases that you make through Hasbro, especially of their licenses, like whether it's Star Wars or Marvel or any of those big licenses, you're gonna have to overpay a little bit. Percentage wise, I think you were kind of not having to pay as much for the Giant Man. But again, that's just my personal opinion. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say down in the comments section. I just feel like, as I said before, you've been overpaying for years now. It makes no sense that this is where you're going to draw the line. In terms of the total amount that you're going to overpay for the figure, at least in my mind, it is more in terms of, total quantity, but in terms of percentage, I don't think you're overpaying as much, and you are getting some really cool engineering, and not just basic articulation. You are getting that finger articulation that people are going insane for. They're literally people jizzing their pants for this stuff. And as I said, I don't really stand on either side of the argument. It really doesn't matter to me. I'm probably not going to pick it up. As I said, my Marvel comic book display has really been shrinking over the years. I've gotten rid of a lot of stuff. But I definitely hope that this does get funded for all of those hardcore collectors that really wanted Giant Man in their display. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the ramifications that this figure not getting funded could have on the collector community as a whole. I think there could be some pretty serious consequences. Not that anybody should be forcefully funding this, but I do believe if this does not get funded, it could in the future discourage Hasbro. We have seen already quite a few failures, not just particularly from Marvel, but just in general. We did have the Ghost Rider HasLab fall short, and then let's say Giant Man fall short. And you can add the Rancor as well to that particular list of action figures that just did not see the light of day. And let's not forget, even though they do not go into production, there is still quite a bit of money attached to the engineering, the developing of the body molds, the paint work. All of that has to be done. And actually going into production and mass producing this per figure is much, much cheaper than developing the actual prototype. So they probably spent an insane amount of money actually manufacturing this figure, not to mention all of the people that they had to pay to market this product and then add it to the website. There's quite a bit of money already invested into it, and if this does not get funded, that is obviously money that is lost, because I'm assuming if it had been funded, then whatever the costs were for this figure to get to this point, it would have just been taken out of there. But now it seems like Hasbro is going to have to find a way to cover for those losses, and guess how that usually goes. I mean, the CEOs, the production as a whole isn't going to halt. What usually is going to happen is there's going to be a price hike somewhere along the lines, or they're going to cut corners on a wave. We could potentially see a deluxe figure somewhere where it's just a repaint, maybe add a retro card to it and then resell it to the public. Not to mention, it definitely has to be demoralizing to have that many projects within such a short amount of time fail. I think eventually it's going to wear down the team, and we could potentially see them maybe decline in the amount of HasLab projects that they're willing to throw out there or they're willing to fund. Again, this is just pure speculation. We just don't know, but I do feel like there will be some very heavy consequences, and I do feel like the collectors are definitely going to have to pay for it. I don't think that the HasLab team will be adding anything to this particular project, just because it's a $199 price point, and I just don't think that there's any room in there to sneak in yet another tier. There were some extra figures thrown in with the Galactus and the Sentinels, but it's almost guaranteed that that had been worked into the price somehow. They had already done the math, they'd done their due diligence. They weren't just going to throw extra figures in there. They already had a very hard budget to work with, so it was a lot simpler for them to jump in and offer a few more items here and there. With this particular figure, I don't really see what else they could add. Maybe an Ant-Man figure, or maybe like a regular Hank Pym, you know, something where he's just wearing a suit or something kind of generic. But I just don't see that being offered because, as I mentioned, the budget is already at the $199 price point, and I just don't see a lot of wiggle room for them to make that nice cool lettuce that they love so much. As far as seeing this out in retail, I did make a video where I talked about the Rancor potentially hitting retail at some point. I just don't see it, primarily because Hasbro has to invest so much money into bringing this to retail. I just don't see them freeing up that much cap space. In reality, it just makes more sense for them to just have this worked out through a HasLab project, just because they can have the customers pay up front, they can pay for all the raw materials, all the labor, all the marketing up front, and then be able to pay themselves as well before the figure even ships, which is not something that they're capable of doing with their regular retail releases. So I know I was holding out hope that we would eventually see a Rancor, like a stripped down Rancor, maybe at like your local Walmart or Target. Same thing with this figure. I mean, I'm hoping that maybe like a stripped down version with no extra faceplates maybe can make it to full-on retail for maybe a little bit cheaper. Maybe they, you know, cut costs here and there, but I just don't see it. It seems like something that if it doesn't get funded through the HasLab project, I just don't think Hasbro is willing to invest that much money. And I get it, they're a multi-billion-dollar company, but you have to keep in mind this isn't their own property, so they do have to pay up for the licensing. So it doesn't really make sense for them to pour that much money into a franchise that they don't even own, like G.I. Joe and Transformers, for example. Not to mention, people always talk about Hasbro being a multi-billion-dollar company, which is, yes, 100% true, or at least multi-million-dollar company, but a lot of those sales don't come from their action figures, or at least not this particular wave, the Marvel Legends line. Most of their profits, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, comes from their game boards or any property that they actually own, and they don't have to pay for licensing fees and things of that nature. But as is usually the case, I'm completely rambling on about nonsense here. I tend to do that from time to time, especially when I talk about something that I genuinely enjoy, like action figures. So I think here is a good spot to end the video. I just wanted to kind of give you guys my final thoughts on this HasLab project. It might get funded, it might not. I might make one more video about the Giant Man HasLab project, whether it gets funded or not. We'll see. But I just kind of wanted to vent my personal thoughts and my personal perspectives on this entire project and the possibility of it not being funded. But as always, I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Let me know down in the comment section. And if you guys enjoy the video, hit the like button, subscribe. It really helps the channel. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you guys in the next one.